Happy weekend from the mythical, magical land of metrology, everybody. This is Kevin, and you are listening to episode number 18 of the weekend edition of the PT Guru podcast. Today, we're going to talk about fear-mongering.
It's been a long time coming. 6 days a week, 10 hours a shift. What about the OT? Well, it ain't worth this. This ain't no 9 to 5 out here on these production lines. So I told them where to shove it, then they could read between the lines.
All right, so first thing we like to do on the weekend version of the podcast, up on YouTube, Facebook, other fun places, is we want to talk about what we talked about during the week. You see, this is the video version of the podcast that we do on the weekends. During the week, we do a normal audio podcast that you can download on iTunes or Stitcher, SoundCloud, any of those places. You can ask Alexa, hey Alexa, play the PT Guru podcast, and Alexa will do so for you. Really cool that way. So during the week, we talked about some fun stuff, of course. We started the week out talking about confidentiality. Where do we draw the line with what we're dealing with folks? Kind of an important thing to think about, kind of an important thing to be knowledgeable about. Then, for Tuesday, we kind of like to talk about metrology and where it meets our day-to-day lives. We talked about the doctor's office. Kind of important stuff there. We've got a lot of instrumentation going on. How do they handle some of this stuff? And if you look around, it's kind of interesting to see if you're a calibration person and you start seeing those cal stickers, it's like, wow, they're everywhere. So kind of cool. Wednesday for our equipment day, we talked about noble versus base metal thermocouples, the different types, and what really are that big split between the two different types of thermocouples, how we're used in different places, why they're used in different places. On Quality Toolkit Thursday, talked about Gantt charts, a great quality tool, but just a great production tool, a great project management tool in general. I use them all over the place. I use them in my regular day-to-day life to try to handle things sometimes. And then on Friday, kind of a little bit nostalgic, was out at a sort of thrift shop and came across a vintage, so to speak, 160-in-1 electronic project kit. Had one when I was a kid, absolutely loved it, thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So kind of talked about that and kind of talked about, raising kids today and dealing with some of the technologies that are out there for them to be able to have that same kind of experience that I know I had at that young age with being able to discover and figure things out like that. So let's move right on to our content. And today we're going to talk about fear-mongering. And if you're in the industry of calibration, if you're in any regulated industry, you're probably pretty familiar with fear-mongering because it's everywhere in those industries. But I'll be honest, it's everywhere in life. It's everywhere in a lot of other industries. It's how some people just want to deal with life, want to deal with situations, try to control situations. That's what it really comes down to. People trying to control things through fear. Not my favorite thing. But we've all been there. If you're in any kind of regulated industry, we've all dealt with that auditor. We've all had that boss that goes well beyond regulated industries. We've had that coworker. The one. That guy that likes to just do this stuff, and it all starts when we're kids. Remember that stuff on the playground, whatever. If you had siblings, you did it, or they did it to you, probably in school. And you got that same, better not or I'm telling. Yep, and you realize as a kid, there's power in those words. You get other people to comply. You can change other people's behavior and you get your way. You have control of the situation with those words. As a kid, you might be right. Somebody else might be doing the wrong thing. Maybe somebody else is doing what they should not be doing. But as you get older, you learn to use those words to bend others to your will. Maybe you just wanted them to comply. Maybe you wanted them just to be afraid of you or afraid of getting in trouble because they're not listening to what you're telling them to do. How many times did you get it from your parents? Hey, wait till your father gets home. Yeah. Remember that one well. Maybe, just maybe, somebody at some point even called you out on it and said, okay, go ahead, tell. And you know what? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but you know what? You felt it and you lost your power in that moment. You got mad, and the only satisfaction you get to come up with is when they actually do maybe get in trouble. You're ticked off all the way up until that point. Now, if they do get in trouble, now you're vindicated and everything's great. But, that's how we all were as kids. That's just life. Wake up, it's 20 years later. And guess what? There are a whole lot of people still stuck in that same stage of life. And in our world of calibration and measurement, in any regulated industry, especially everywhere, it's out there, and people are going to do the same thing. They want you to comply with what they say, not with what the actual purpose of maybe a rule or regulation is. They just want you to comply with what they say. So then they become your parents, who are going to tell you that the boogeyman's going to get you if you don't brush your teeth, or if you don't take that bath or shower, or whatever the case may be, whatever you didn't want to do. There it is. The fear-mongering again. It's just so ingrained into all of us in even just the way we were raised. Now, the problem this leads to is exactly the wrong environment for science, creativity, good metrology to actually happen. What you end up building is a bunch of robots that blindly follow the orders but don't understand the premise of the orders. Now, if you're in the military, this is pretty important because those rules are often there to help prevent you from getting killed. At that point, comply. Do what you're damn told. However, when we look at this bigger picture of things like, in my case, I'm talking about metrology and calibration, other industries as well. There's other creative ways to potentially look at rules and standards that might make them easier to follow, because what you want to think about is actually the spirit of the standard, the spirit of the rule. How am I going to do the right thing in this situation? Not how do I blindly follow a procedure that could be completely wrong. Run into that more than once. So in the world of calibration, we've got this document, I talk about it all the time, called ISO 17025. That's our standard. That's what we live with. Now, the fun part of this standard is that it's an assessment standard. And this means it doesn't actually tell you how to do anything. That's the fun part when I've dealt with folks who maybe come out of the 9001, 9100, 16949 type backgrounds. There's a lot of hows in those types of documents. You're going to go about it, and you're going to go about it this way. And at that point, it's comply. Okay, that's what it says I have to do, and this is how it says I have to go about it. Fair enough, I'm going to do that. The 17025 and the other 17 series of standards do not tell you any hows. They're going to tell you that you need to have this, and that you need to do this. They're not going to tell you how to do it. They just tell you need to do it. The beauty of this is that it opens it up for you. You do what fits your process, you do what fits your situation. A 2 or 3 person calibration lab is going to handle things a lot differently than a 300 to 500 person calibration organization that maybe spans numerous locations throughout the world. Much different way of handling things. When you have 3 or 4 people, communication's not usually too much of an issue. If you're paying attention, you know what's going on. When you have a much larger organization, heck, even once you get beyond 3, 4, 5 people, the communication thing can be a big deal. And so now you have to deal with how you're making sure everybody knows the things that they need to know to get a job done. So, there's a lot of ways to look at it and go about it. So then when you have that lovely person in your midst that says, you better do this that way, guess what? Most likely they're full of it. Sorry. Especially if you're that guy. Keep listening. It's the same. It's just like back on the playground. It's all about that fear-mongering and trying to control the situation, instead of actually having the conversation at that point to say, what's the spirit of the standard? What's the spirit of the guidelines, the rules we're looking at? And are we outside of that. You can be following every procedure in the world and find that you're not following the actual spirit of that standard. Now, a lot of the folks that work in the field of consulting are really good at this. Why? Because fear sells, at least in the short term. And that's my deal with it. And that's why I don't like it. And that's why I don't believe in it, is that it sells in the short term, but it's a long-term loser. Just, that's what it comes down to. Eventually, people are going to see that you're just making threats to make threats. The idea here, though, is that, for people like consultants, people that step into advisory roles, even in existing companies potentially, scaring people is a whole lot better way of trying to prove that you know more and they need your help. And unfortunately, that help means more of their dollars or more of their time, whatever capital we're dealing with. Now, this isn't to say that you shouldn't listen to the consultants, and heck, I am one. I'm just saying that you should ask them to kind of clearly state the problem, and then consider proposing your own solution. Say, why can't we go about it this way? Why can't the system that we have work with maybe some tweaks? And, that's going to go a long way to maybe having the conversation instead of just saying blindly follow this rule because I said this is the best way to do it, or I said this is the better yet only way to do it. That's their suggestion to fiction issue might be 100% on track. I'm just saying have a conversation. However, it might not fit your system. There's bigger issues. I've run into this with consultants in the past where they want to suggest solutions that are intended for 100 people companies or more, large corporation type environments, when in actuality what they're looking at is a 15, 20 person shop. That same solution might not work in both ways. And the other thing you need to think about is, is the person that's making these demands and telling you need to do it this way, are they really talking about mountains? Or are they talking about molehills? Because molehills are all they can find. That's all they got. So they're just going to blow them up as big as they can. It's the way it is sometimes. And the downside of this behavior, and is that we're seeing a lot of this behavior today. Everybody's got a soapbox, so everybody likes to stand on it. I guess I'm doing it right now in my own way. Which is a fair assessment. The things are changing so fast in this world, in our industry, in all industries, that the rules are changing. And people that have been doing some of these things for a long time, who maybe were really good experts 15 years ago, 10 years ago, might not be such good experts now because the things have changed. The rules have changed. They're changing every day. Think about Uber and Lyft and how many cities outlawed them before they even got there on the back of the cabs and limo companies. Before you could even, Uber decided to step foot in certain areas, they got shut down, and they passed laws to outlaw these kind of folks even coming to their town. That's because the limo and taxi companies didn't want the competition. They feared it. So what do? They go to the government, they lobby, they say, hey, we need a new law that prevents this from happening. It's straight up leading with fear. There's no reason for it. Now, the problem with all of these scenarios is while they might win, again, short game, they win. Yes. You know what, though? Every one of them falls apart in the long term. Sooner or later, somebody's going to call you on your bull, and you're done. And what happens at that point too, as soon as somebody calls you on your bull, you lose all your credibility. And that is not a good place to be. Sooner or later, they're going to figure out that your my way or the highway consultant approach didn't know where there was an option B, C, or D. You didn't bother to tell that. And look at Uber and Lyft and Airbnb now putting well-established businesses out of business. even if they had to take on the mafia to do it. It's crazy. And how do things work out for that, do what I say boss that you've had. Had a few of those in the past. This one goes a couple of different ways. Again, in the short term, he probably wins. You're going to comply, or you're going to lose your job, or you're going to get written up, or whatever the stupid deal of the week is. Now, first off, if it's really wrong, he's going to get called on it sooner or later. You know that. So just know that that's going to happen. And what's going to happen when he gets called on it? He's going to blame somebody else. Love that part, don't you? Probably you. But ultimately, things are not going to go his way. It's not going to work out that way. The world has a wonderful way of sorting itself out in these situations. Now, worse yet, though, when we look at really big picture thinking, good employees are going to leave. When you try to lead with fear, good employees are not going to hang around. Great employees are not going to be around long. Employees in a culture of fear don't produce great results. They maintain the status quo because that's all they can do. That's all they feel they're worthy of doing. Think about it. If you show up for work every day afraid you're getting fired, how well can you do your job? Now, companies like that are going to quickly shrink. And if they don't shrink, it's going to be worse yet. They're going to stagnate. And stagnation is just the absolute scourge of good business. It's not going to last long. Real innovation cannot happen in that sort of environment. It just doesn't exist because now people have been put in their boxes. And you don't step outside of your box because when you do, you're going to get yelled at. You're going to be told that you're not any good. There's a good one in kind of self-help psychology. It takes 7 yeses to overcome 1 no. It takes 7 bits of positivity to override that 1 bit of negativity. So when you have a negative culture, even if you try to periodically infuse some positivity in there, it's not going to work. You need to have a constant positive culture with the periodic bit of negativity that's called life. We all have negativity. There's always going to be bad things that happen. You're going to lose a client. You're going to screw up an order. It's going to happen. The thing is, you fix it and you move on and you keep the positivity thing going. That's what makes a good work environment. Living in a compliance world is always going to be a tough balancing act. I get it. I know it. I know it extremely well. Been there 20 years. Over 20 by now. So I get it 100%. However, you need to look at the fact that, you do need to comply. But if you're really good at it and you're willing to do the work, that's what it's all about. Do the work, read the standards, study the standards, take the classes. There's so much out there. So much info out there. You can really make good choices about how you're going to go about the how part of complying with the rules, the regulations, the things you need to do. Having the ability to choose lets you own it. When you own it, then you've got a real system. And because you own it, you feel like you control it. As long as you feel like you have control over it and it doesn't control you, you're going to maintain a much more positive outlook on things. When things tend to try to control you, now it's all about fear. It's all about that fear-mongering thing. It's all about stress. When things control you, you're stressed. You can't take it. It's just not going to happen. Some folks like it. Some folks prefer other people to make the decisions. But even when they like other people to make the decisions for them, they still in the back of their mind have that part where they go, I think that's wrong. And when they know it's wrong, now they're going to feel like they're unnecessarily controlled, and it's just not the right way. So having the ability to choose your path is going to help you choose the right path, maintain the work that you need to maintain. And let's just face it, the fear-mongering folks are just trying to steal that from you. They're trying to steal it from everybody because they say, I know what's best, when they might not. So have the conversation. Don't be afraid of them. Stand up to the bullies. That's what it's all about. Hey, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, do me a huge favor and swing by iTunes and leave me a rating. It helps other people find this thing. It helps people get the word out about what I'm doing, and I would very much appreciate you listening to me today. In this case, if you're watching on YouTube, I very much appreciate you watching on YouTube. Do me a huge favor too, if you are on YouTube, hit up my channel and subscribe. It, again, same kind of thing. Helps more people find us, find what we're doing here, find out what we're talking about, and all that kind of fun stuff. Do me a huge favor, swing by the website, www.ptguruconsulting.com. Let me know how I'm doing. Ask a question, shoot me an email. Just say hi. I'd love hearing from everybody. So hope you're having a great weekend, and I'm going to talk to you on Monday. Thank you so much.